Once upon a time, there was a girl named Yukihime walking on her way to work. But a group of boys was waiting for her, hiding up in a tree until she passed by. One of them told his friends that the time had come to defeat their teacher, Yukihime. As soon as they spotted her, they called out to her from above and all jumped at her. Yukihime stopped, looked at them, and created an invisible barrier between her and them, then sent them flying into the water. The people gathered around, seeing it as something completely normal. It seemed to be part of Yukihime's daily routine. When she arrived at school, she entered the classroom and told the students that anyone who managed to defeat her would have the chance to leave the village and go to the capital, as ordered by the village chief. But of course, that would only happen if anyone could actually defeat Yukihime, especially Toda, who tried day and night without success. She told them that if any of them thought they would have a bright future in the capital, they were wrong because she would be their biggest obstacle. Toda stood at the back with his friends, upset, and asked Yukihime how she even managed to defeat him and create that strange invisible barrier. His friend Shiro was also surprised and asked her if this was the magic they had heard about but never believed existed. The whole class complained that it wasn't fair for her to use magic while they were expected to defeat her. Yukihime told Toda that she hadn't raised him just to hear him complain all day, so she punished him and his friends, throwing them all out of the classroom in a rather rough manner. Later, she went to sit with her colleague and finish her work. At that moment, her colleague told her that she was a bit too harsh on Toda and that she needed to understand that everyone here dreamed of going to the capital and building a future for themselves. Yukihime told him that there was no point in discussing this because it wouldn't affect her or change her stance. He replied that he knew she was Toda's adoptive mother and that's why she was so worried about him, but she had to let him experience new things, do what he wanted, and give him more freedom. Yukihime thought about his words and admitted that he had a point. After school, Toda went out with his friends, talking about Yukihime and her magic, surprised that this was the first time they had learned she could use magic. One of Toda's friends told them that people had known about magic for 10 years, and he had also heard that in the capital, people used magic in their daily lives. It was incredibly common there. Not only that, but they had even developed mobile applications that made magic easier to use for those who didn't know how. Hearing those words, they all got excited. But Toda told them that even the cheapest of those applications was too expensive. Even if they worked for 100 years in the village, they wouldn't be able to afford a subscription. That's why they had to continue training the old-fashioned way and not rely on magic if they wanted to leave the village and climb the sky tower. This motivated everyone, and they vowed to achieve their dream before they died. After that, Toda said goodbye to his friends, telling them he had an important errand to run and would return soon. His friends wondered what could be so important for Toda on a day like this. One of them then reminded the others that today was the anniversary of Toda's parents' passing. Toda went to his parents' graves, sat down, and spoke to them. He told them that 2 years had passed since their death and apologized because he could no longer remember their faces or the happy times they had spent together. But he still missed them and always thought about them. At the same time, his friends were also thinking about him, wondering how he must be feeling now after losing his parents in a car accident and losing all his memories afterward. One of them said that Toda had mentioned before that it wasn't entirely a bad thing because, thanks to that accident, he had met Yukihime, who saved him from death, took him in, and raised him. He loved her very much and was happy living with her. When Toda finished visiting his parents, he was about to leave when he suddenly saw a boy standing in front of him, telling him that he was waiting for him at the top of the sky tower. Then, the boy disappeared. Toda was surprised, unable to understand why he kept seeing this boy and why he always said the same words every time. But he didn't think too much about it since he had gotten used to it. He went home and had dinner with Yukihime, telling her that he wanted to learn magic just like her. Yukihime told him that this required courage and a few other things he didn't understand. He asked her to stop saying things that made no sense just to discourage him from the idea. After finishing his meal, he went to continue his training. He called out to Yukihime, telling her that he would defeat her soon. The next day, he and his friends got thrown out of the classroom again in the same way Yukihime liked, by sending them flying through the window, since they had failed for the millionth time to defeat her. Toda stood with his friends, exhausted and hopeless about ever making it to the capital. Then, their teacher, Chibi, arrived and offered to help them by teaching them some magic. They immediately agreed and went with him to start their first lesson. He taught them a few tricks that could help them against Yukihime, and they became curious about why he was helping them and why he specifically asked them not to tell Yukihime that he was teaching them magic. Chibi told them that his approach was different from Yukihime's and that they didn't get along well. He just wanted to give them a chance to achieve their goals. Toda, however, stood aside, feeling frustrated that he couldn't use magic like his friends. Chibi approached him and told him not to worry because he had another idea that might help him. He then handed Toda a bracelet and told him to give it to Yukihime. Toda went home, holding the bracelet, wondering if what he was doing counted as cheating and what the bracelet was even for. At that moment, Yukihime appeared, startling him. He panicked and dropped the bracelet from his hand. She asked him where he got that bracelet and why. Toda quickly told her that he had bought it as a gift for her, unable to think of any other excuse for why he had it in the first place. He became even more nervous and told her that if she didn't like the gift, she could throw it away. Then, he turned to leave. However, she liked the bracelet and decided to wear it because Toda had given it to her. The next day, Toda and his friends planned to attack Yukihime again. They would use magic while he would join them with his staff. When Yukihime finished her shopping and stepped outside, Toda's friends surrounded her, casting a spell that restrained her, preventing her from moving. Toda tried to run as fast as he could to catch up with them before they defeated her without him. Meanwhile, his friends were overjoyed since it was the first time they had managed to restrain Yukihime. They thought they had finally won. But then, suddenly, Chibi appeared behind them and knocked them unconscious one by one. He then spoke to Yukihime while she was still bound and unable to move. He told her that it had been extremely difficult for him to stay disguised as a teacher at the school for 6 whole months. Then, he gathered numerous arrows and sent them flying toward her. She attempted to block the attack with her magic, but the bracelet prevented her from using any spells, leaving her defenseless as the spears pierced her body. However, she tried to remain standing in front of Chibi. Chibi admitted that she was tough and that it made sense for such a high bounty to be placed on capturing her. At that moment, she realized that Chibi was a hunter and asked him how he had found her. He told her that it wasn't easy, but he wasn't going to waste time explaining things to her. He had no intention of wasting his time on a vampire, so he unsheathed his sword, ready to kill her. Just then, Toda arrived and stood in front of Chibi when he saw that he was about to kill Yukihime, with his friends lying unconscious on the ground. However, Chibi didn't waste time with Toda. He immediately cut off his arm and told him that he had been brave, but this was the end for him. He raised his sword to finish him off. But Yukihime couldn't bear it. She rushed to stand in front of Chibi, letting the sword land on her arm instead of Toda. Chibi was shocked and asked how she had been able to move when the bracelet was supposed to be restraining her, but she didn't answer. She then told Toda that she and his friends had been allowed to go to the capital. Chibi laughed and said that her love and concern for Toda had given her the strength to break the bracelet's magic. Without wasting any time, he used his sword to slice her body into 100 pieces. After making sure she was dead, he stabbed his sword into Toda's body, then walked away to finish off Toda's friends as well. However, suddenly, Yukihime spoke to Toda. She told him that anyone else in his place would have died by now, but 2 years ago, in order to save him from death, she had to turn him into an immortal creature. She told him that if he wanted to save his friends, he had only 2 choices, either surrender or complete his transformation and seek revenge. The choice was his to make. But if he wanted to become a monster, he would have to drink her blood. Toda decided to take revenge and drank Yukihime's blood. As soon as he did, his severed arm grew back, and this time, an overwhelming power surged within him. With just a single strike, he defeated Chibi. However, after that, he collapsed to the ground, unable to move, and lost consciousness. He woke up to the sound of a girl's voice. It was Yukihime. He asked her how this was possible. She told him that she also couldn't die. She then confessed to him that she was a vampire over 700 years old and apologized for turning him into an immortal monster like herself. Toda told her that he was happy and that none of it was her fault. The thing that made him happiest was that she was still alive. At that moment, Toda's friends also woke up and ran toward him, overjoyed. The next day, Toda went to say goodbye to his friends, telling them that he and Yukihime were going to the capital because they couldn't stay in the village any longer. If anyone found out Yukihime's location, she could be in danger. His friends bid him farewell and told him that they would join him soon. Yukihime and Toda began their journey to the capital, and Toda was so excited that he seemed to be flying with joy. Yukihime couldn't believe his state, so she asked him why he was so happy. Toda told her that he was going to a new place, where he would build a new life, make lots of friends, and form many connections, just as he had always dreamed. Then, he was the one who asked why they were walking such a long distance instead of just taking some kind of transport to their destination. Yukihime told him that if they took any public transportation, they would become an easy target for hunters. But more than that, there was something strange she had noticed while they were walking. The world's population had decreased significantly. In the past 2 hours, they had barely seen 2 or 3 people together. However, Toda didn't pay any attention to what she was saying. So she reminded him that he was now immortal and that he shouldn't form deep connections with people, or he would regret it later when they left him and died. That dampened his excitement, but at that moment, he met his first friend, a boy named Kuramaru. Toda was shocked when he learned that Kuramaru had lived at the top of the Sky Tower, the very place Toda was willing to risk his life to reach. But Kuramaru told him not to get too excited because he was practically exiled. Toda didn't understand and asked what he meant by exiled. Kuramaru explained that he couldn't return home unless he hunted down a vampire who was about 700 years old. Then, he revealed that he was actually talking about Yukihime. But when Kuramaru looked closer, he noticed that Toda had no reflection in the glass. That's when he realized that Toda wasn't human. At that moment, Yukihime appeared at the wrong time. As soon as Kuramaru saw her, he was shocked because she was the vampire he was searching for. He drew his sword and charged toward Yukihime, telling Toda that he was from the Vajra clan, one of the greatest hunters, and that creatures like them had to be sent back to the underworld. But before Kuramaru could react, Yukihime drove her hand through his body. He collapsed to the ground, bleeding. Toda was horrified by the scene and asked Yukihime how she could do something like that. Yukihime calmed him down, telling him that Kuramaru was also immortal and that within minutes, he would be awake again. When Toda looked at Kuramaru and saw his wound healing, he ran to wake him up. But as soon as Kuramaru opened his eyes, he quickly grabbed his sword again. At that moment, he remembered when he had been sitting with his brother, who told him that he couldn't officially join the clan unless he proved himself by hunting Yukihime. If he failed, he was never to return because he would be considered a disgrace. Yukihime told Kuramaru that she had defeated him effortlessly the first time, and she wouldn't bother with him again unless he could first defeat Toda. Only then would she face him for a second time. Toda protested, saying he had nothing to do with this and didn't want to be dragged into these things. But Kuramaru told Toda that he had to fight him if he wanted to defeat Yukihime. Then, Kuramaru launched the first attack against Toda. Toda moved quickly, then suddenly stopped the fight and told Kuramaru that he was willing to challenge him, but on one condition: whoever won would get to request something from the other. It was foolish to do something for someone without getting something in return. Besides, it wasn't fair for Kuramaru to have a sword while Toda had nothing to fight with. Kuramaru agreed and handed Toda a staff. Toda took it, and the battle immediately resumed. Both were strong and fast, countering each other's attacks. Yukihime stood by, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. But then, out of nowhere, Kuramaru suddenly severed Toda's head. Thinking he had won, he relaxed for a moment. However, in an instant, Toda's head returned to its place, and he delivered a decisive blow to Kuramaru, causing him to collapse to the ground, unable to move anymore. That meant Kuramaru had to fulfill Toda's request. Toda told him that his condition was for them to become friends. Kuramaru had no choice but to agree. They both signed a friendship agreement. After that, Kuramaru joined Yukihime and Toda so they could rest before continuing their long journey to the capital. At that moment, Toda suggested that they should go annoy Yukihime for a bit. Kuramaru didn't care much, so Toda decided to go alone. But when he searched for her, he found a little girl he had seen once before in the village. He was completely shocked and asked her what she was doing here. The little girl just laughed at him. Then, all of a sudden, she transformed into Yukihime. Toda was even more stunned. Yukihime told him that this little girl's form was her real appearance, and her real name was Evangeline. She explained that she used an old magic potion to change her appearance to the one he was familiar with to confuse the hunters. After finishing her explanation, Toda suddenly attacked her just like he used to in the past. Kuramaru joined in, and they all had a great time together. The next day, Toda invited Kuramaru to continue the journey to the capital with them and to forget about the whole hunting business. Kuramaru agreed, and for the first time, he felt that his true place was with Yukihime and Toda, not with the clan as he had originally thought. Toda was overjoyed when Kuramaru agreed. In his excitement, he told them he had a great idea. He asked what they thought about forming a group of immortals who would help people, do good, and use their powers for something meaningful. Yukihime burst out laughing, telling him that he reminded her of herself when she first became immortal. Back then, she and another person had the same idea. But she didn't finish her sentence because suddenly, they saw a large number of cars approaching them. The vehicles stopped in front of Yukihime, and from them emerged a girl named Karen, along with several others. A large security force stepped out of the other cars, all of them delighted at Yukihime's return. Toda had no idea what was happening. Even Karen, as soon as she stepped out, couldn't stand him. She asked Yukihime if this was the boy she had wasted 2 years on and stayed away from them for. She was waiting for the perfect moment to attack and kill him. But Yukihime told her not to bother because Toda was also immortal now. Toda, fed up, shouted at them, demanding that someone explain what was going on. Yukihime just laughed and told him that she had already established an organization for immortals, just like the idea he had thought of 3 minutes ago. But unlike his idea, her organization had existed for years, and all of its guards treated her with special respect. Toda stood there, mouth open, unable to understand or believe anything he had just heard. Toda's shock quickly turned into excitement the moment they put him on a ship heading for the capital. When he saw the sky tower in front of him, he started jumping with joy, saying all sorts of things that didn't make sense. Everyone stared at him in confusion, even Karen, who asked Yukiheim how she had managed to spend 2 years with someone like Toda. He wasn't even fit to be her servant. Yukiheim told her that Toda was precious to her, which was why she had put up with him. She then asked Karen to get used to Toda as well, since both she and Toda had high levels of immortality, meaning they would be together for a long time. Soon, the ship arrived at the headquarters of the UQ organization that Yukiheim had established. They told Toda that this was their secret base. But Toda looked around and told them that it looked more like a resort. There was nothing secret about it. They admitted that they had actually built a small resort inside. That got Toda excited, and he asked how much farther it was from here to the capital. They told him it was only about 10 kilometers away. Meanwhile, as soon as Yukiheim arrived, all the guards ran toward her, crying with joy at her return. Annoyed, she sent them flying one by one because she wasn't the sentimental type. Toda and Kuramaru stood there, watching her. Toda asked if all the immortals there were vampires. That's when Makabe and Ame, two of the first members of the organization, approached and told Toda that there were many different types of immortals. A large group of them belonged to the organization, but it was rare to find many vampires among them. Then, Makabe told Toda that he had heard a lot about him over the past 2 years and had been eager to meet him, just as he was now excited to see him join the organization. Toda told him that he was really excited and couldn't wait. Makabe then said that in order to join them, Toda had to pass a small test. Toda was surprised and asked what kind of test. Makabe told him that he needed to defeat any monster to prove his strength. Or, if he preferred Yukiheim's method, he had to land a single hit on any member of the organization. This had to be done before sunset on the 7th day. He was allowed to use any strategy, including surprise attacks, attacking at night, or even using any weapon he could find. Toda was thrilled and told them that this would be easy. But Kuramaru warned him to be careful because they all seemed highly skilled. Makabe told them that to keep things organized, Toda would have to land his hit on Ame, while Kuramaru would go against Makabe. However, Karen interrupted and said that she wanted the challenge to be between her and Toda, not Ame. Makabe agreed. Without hesitation or even thinking, Toda immediately attacked Karen. But Karen effortlessly struck him on the head with her hammer, knocking him to the ground without breaking a sweat. Then, it was Kuramaru's turn. He charged at Makabe, but he couldn't even touch him. Makabe hadn't even used magic or anything against him. The two of them sat there, resting their heads on their hands, not knowing what to do. They had lost, and not just any loss. They hadn't even had the chance to start the fight properly. While they were sitting there, a girl walked past them, dropping a lot of things. They quickly got up to help her. They found out that she worked at a restaurant nearby and had been throwing away things she no longer needed. Toda and Kuramaru helped her get rid of them, then asked who she was since she seemed like an ordinary person. She told them that she was, in fact, just a regular human, not immortal and not even able to use magic. Toda was surprised and told her that he didn't know they hired normal people here. The girl told him that she had ended up working here by chance and didn't think there was another human like her in the place. She also mentioned that she had recently moved and used to live in a village far away. Toda told her that he had also just arrived from a village, so he offered to help her with her work. Kuramaru reminded him that they needed to train before time ran out. Toda told him that they would continue training after helping the girl. The girl was happy and agreed, asking them to move the dishes to the back storage. Toda and Kuramaru picked up all the boxes containing the dishes and went to look for the back storage. But they forgot to ask the girl where it was. As they walked, they heard someone tell them that the back storage was down the path to their right. They followed the path and found themselves in an underground storage area, but it looked massive and strange. They kept going down until they encountered a man who stopped them and asked what they were doing there. They told him that they were just storing the dishes. The man told them that they had discovered his secret hideout, which wasn't bad for two newcomers who had just arrived with Yukiheim. Toda was confused and asked how he knew Yukiheim. The man told him that he was also part of the organization and that his name was Jinbei. He was ranked second in the group. Toda and Kuramaru were shocked because being ranked second meant he had joined the organization right after Yukiheim. But suddenly, Jinbei started acting strangely and told Toda that there was a sword in the storage. If he could lift it, it would be his. Toda told him that he didn't like carrying things around with him. Jinbei told him that this wasn't just any sword, it was crafted by the most famous sorcerer in history. Toda said he would give it a try, but when he tried to lift it, it wouldn't budge. Then, Toda heard a voice telling him to turn the dial on the sword. When Toda did, he found that the sword lifted easily and he was able to hold it. Jinbei was stunned and asked how he had managed to do that. Toda told him that he had heard someone tell him to turn the dial but had no idea where the voice was coming from. The voice spoke to him again. When Toda focused, he realized that the voice was coming from the sword itself. He was completely shocked. The sword told him that it had spoken to him because it was tired of being stuck in one place for so many years. Jinbei took the sword from Toda and examined it before handing it back. But when Toda grabbed it again, it suddenly fell to the ground, becoming so heavy that it knocked Toda down. Jinbei took the sword from him again and told him that this sword had the ability to change its weight at will, making it an even more powerful weapon in battle. After that, Jinbei offered to train them. They couldn't believe their ears when they heard those words and immediately agreed. Without wasting any time, they began their training right away. Toda took the sword, and he and Kuramaru trained day and night without holding back. 7 full days passed, and only a few hours remained before sunset. If they failed, they would lose the test. At that moment, Toda and Kuramaru decided to face Karen and Makabe. Kuramaru stood before Makabe, who told him that he had thought Kuramaru would give up and not take the test at all. But Kuramaru told him that the word surrender wasn't in his vocabulary. Meanwhile, Toda decided to annoy Karen first. He asked if a hit from his sword could ruin her beauty. Karen told him not to worry about weapons, what mattered was whether he could even land a hit on her. Toda leaped at her, just like he used to with Yukiheim, increasing his sword's power by 1,000 times. But Karen blocked it, and Toda tried to break her weapon. Meanwhile, Kuramaru dueled Makabe, but he couldn't get past his defenses or land a hit anywhere on his body. Makabe even knocked him to the ground. That's when Kuramaru decided to think outside the box. He remembered the time Toda had won against him, when Kuramaru had cut off Toda's head, only for Toda to instantly reattach it, which had distracted Kuramaru long enough for Toda to strike him and win. So, he did the same thing. He let Makabe cut off his arm. The moment Makabe did, Kuramaru seized the opportunity and drove his sword into Makabe's body. That meant Kuramaru had passed his test. But then, he realized that the sun was about to set. He could only hope that Toda had passed, or at least was close to passing, his test. At that moment, Toda was still fighting Karen. He increased his sword's power once more, causing Karen to fall to the ground. This was the moment when Toda was supposed to land his hit and win. But just before he could, he suddenly heard Shinobu, the girl who worked at the restaurant, screaming. He immediately ran to help her. That's when they saw a group of massive monsters surrounding her. Toda called out to her from a distance, telling her not to be afraid because he was coming to save her. Karen also rushed to help, telling Toda that she would distract the monsters while he rescued the girl. That's exactly what they did. However, one of the monsters charged at Shinobu. Toda quickly took it down, then finished off the rest of the monsters in less than 3 minutes. By the time Yukiheim, Kuramaru, and Makabe arrived, they were both shocked and impressed by what they saw. But then, the sun set, meaning Toda had missed his chance to complete the test. Karen told Yukiheim that the number of monsters Toda had defeated was so high that it was practically the same as if he had landed a hit on her. Yukiheim told Karen that if that was the case, then Toda had passed the test. Toda was overjoyed and ran to thank Karen, but she immediately smacked him away with her hammer to keep him at a distance. However, Yukiheim wasn't finished. She told them that all those monsters had come from underground. Someone had released them. Then, she assigned Kuramaru and Toda their first official mission, to eliminate all the underground monsters. She sent Jinbei with them because she knew he was the one who had released the monsters in the first place. A few days later, Toda was training as usual with his new sword beside him. He was talking with Shinobu, telling her that Yukiheim had summoned him, Kuramaru, and Karen to her office. She had told them that she wanted to give them a real mission. Both he and Kuramaru were excited, but Karen told Yukiheim that she shouldn't rely on Toda and Kuramaru for anything important just yet. Yukiheim told her not to worry because the mission was actually meant for Karen, while Toda and Kuramaru would only assist her. She would be the one responsible for them. Karen agreed, and Yukiheim, wanting to motivate them, told them that the mission wasn't too difficult. They would only die 2 or 3 times. Strangely enough, that actually got them excited, except for Shinobu, who was the only sensible one. She told Toda that the part about dying wasn't exactly encouraging. Toda told her that the best part was that they would get to ride fancy cars for the first time in their lives while going on a mission. However, when the mission time arrived, Karen made them run on foot instead. She told them that they weren't ready for the cars yet. Then, she explained the mission to them. She told them that poverty had spread across all the countries of the world, even the wealthy nations had failed to combat it. As a result, poor communities had started emerging in elite areas. But with these new social classes came others who despised the existence of the poor, believing that they didn't deserve to live. Their mission now was to protect these poor people from those who sought to eliminate them. Toda told Karen that, despite everything, she still had a kind heart and emotions. She immediately smacked him on the head, telling him that she didn't want anyone flattering her. They continued running, and as soon as Toda saw a group of children and an elderly woman surrounded by many men, he thought that this was their mission. So, he jumped in and started attacking the men. He confidently told the old woman not to worry because they were from the UQ organization and were here to save her. The woman then told him that the men he had just beaten up were actually members of the organization. When Toda focused, he realized that he had mistakenly attacked his own allies. But he quickly acted as if nothing had happened, gathered them all, and suggested they play an arm wrestling match. They all challenged Toda, and all of them defeated him. As punishment, they made him cook dinner for everyone. Instead of being the hero who would eliminate evil, Toda found himself in the kitchen preparing food for them. But his cooking turned out so good that everyone was amazed. Even Karen, for the first time, complimented him, saying that this was the only thing he had done well. But then, she hit him again and told him to go back to the kitchen to cook more for them. Afterward, Karen told him that the next day, he needed to learn how to perform a quick step and improve his arm wrestling skills. This would be part of his training. The next day, she went with the woman in charge of the shelter. The woman told her that many people wanted her to shut down the shelter for the children, and she was terrified of them. That was why she had requested the organization's help. Karen reassured her and promised to help. The woman thanked her. Meanwhile, Toda began training, as Karen had instructed, on the quick step technique. He kept practicing it multiple times, thinking that he had already mastered it. However, a man approached him and told him that what he was doing was wrong. It wasn't a quick step. A proper quick step was when someone could cover a great distance in less than a second without leaving a trace behind. The man demonstrated multiple times, and each time, Toda was amazed. He asked how he was able to do it. The man explained the technique to him and also showed him how to win in arm wrestling. Toda praised him. The man, whose name was Kaito, loved compliments, so he kept showing off his skills. He told Toda that since he liked him, he would teach him. But first, Toda needed to strengthen his legs. From now on, he had to rely on his legs for everything, as they were the key to executing the quick step technique. Toda followed his advice and returned to the shelter, literally using his legs for everything: eating, cooking, playing, and even doing daily tasks. Eventually, he started improving, becoming faster and learning how to move without leaving a trace. However, Kaito told him that he still wasn't fast enough. After finishing training with Toda, Kaito went to meet a man named Nagima. He apologized for being late, explaining that he had met a boy and decided to teach him a few things, which delayed him. Nagima told him not to form connections with people who were going to die anyway. It was a waste of time. At that moment, Kaito transformed into a massive, terrifying white wolf. Nagima and another man standing with him said that it was time for them to get to work. They were hunters. At that moment, Toda was preparing lunch and distributing food to the men in the village with his friend. However, after Toda left, one of the hunters slaughtered all the men. Then, he opened a portal to ambush Karen while she was distracted. But Karen was sharp. She noticed him and engaged him in a fight. The hunter pulled out multiple weapons and attacked Karen. She fell to the ground, and he walked away. Meanwhile, Toda was still distributing food with his friend Roki. That's when he noticed a massive fire engulfing the entire village. A group of small creatures was responsible for it. They attacked Roki, attempting to kill him. But Kuramaru arrived just in time, eliminating them. He told Toda that they weren't just dwarves. They were called shadow puppets. They were the ones who had burned down the village. Their goal now was to stall them until Karen revived. However, they didn't get the chance to do anything. The white wolf appeared. When he saw Toda, he noticed his fangs. That's when he realized that Toda was a vampire and an immortal. He told Toda that even if he was immortal, there was always a way to deal with beings like him. Then, he made a series of hand movements and struck Toda. Toda fell to the ground, his body glowing strangely, and he didn't get back up. Meanwhile, the hunter continued torturing Karen and managed to restrain her, preventing her from moving. Now, only Kuramaru was left to fight against Nagima and the wolf. They clashed fiercely for a long time. Then, the white wolf told Kuramaru that he had figured out how his immortality worked. Kuramaru had to move at extreme speeds and strike multiple times. This way, he wouldn't be able to regenerate his injured parts, and he would die. That's exactly what the wolf did. He began attacking Kuramaru from every direction. Kuramaru falls to the ground, unable to continue, and sees Toda. He realizes that the wolf has trapped him, preventing him from waking up with its magic. The wolf then continues attacking Kuramaru, driving 2 arrows into his back to stop him from moving, intending to cast an ice seal to ensure they won't hinder him again. But Rocky arrives, crying, and stands in front of him, telling him to leave his village and not harm his friends. Meanwhile, the hunter tells Karen that he knows everything about her and recounts how, long ago, in a small distant village, a girl was born who was a target for all witches, who wanted to kill her. Because of this, the village chief ordered the girl to be burned to avoid trouble for the village. But suddenly, another girl appeared, took the girl from the village, who was Karen, and saved her, fleeing far away so no one could find them. Meanwhile, Rocky grabs a stick and attacks the white wolf, but the wolf laughs at him, grabs him, and knocks the stick from his hand. At that moment, Rocky asks why they are doing this and why they are so determined to kill them and drive them out of their village. Manga tells him that this is not their land but belongs to his clan, who live atop the tower and are about to leave for Mars. He claims that humans took something that wasn't theirs when they exploited the absence of its rightful owners. Rocky responds that even if that were true, it doesn't justify killing them and treating them as if they were nothing. The White Wolf, tired of the talk, throws Rocky to the ground to finish him off. At that moment, Kuram can't bear it anymore and rushes toward Rocky to stop the White Wolf from killing his friend. But what surprises them even more is that Toda saves them, blocking the White Wolf's attack. Everyone is shocked that he managed to wake up and break free from the magic cast upon him. He is furious that the White Wolf wanted to kill his friends. Meanwhile, Karen finally breaks free from the hunter's control, fights back, and lands a blow he will never forget. She warns him never to show his face again because if he does, it will be the last night of his life. Toda, on the other hand, suddenly finds a black shield forming on his hands, radiating immense power. When Kuram asks what it is, Toda cannot answer and only says he feels a powerful force in his hands. He then attacks the White Wolf, sending him flying. Kuram encourages him, saying that he is almost healed and that his lower half will regenerate soon so he can join him. Toda continues his assault on the White Wolf, who, instead of being intimidated, enjoys facing an opponent he had personally taught half of the moves he is using now. At this moment, Karen tells Toda to take his friends and leave, saying she will handle the rest. Everyone hesitates, but Toda tells the White Wolf that he has known from the start that he is Kaido. The White Wolf laughs and transforms back into a human. Toda explains that no one else in the village can move as fast as the wolf did, just like Kaido had taught him. Kaido praises his memory, but Toda asks him why he is doing this and why he enjoys killing children. Kaido responds that he loves combat and competition and doesn't care who he fights or kills. Toda tells him that, in that case, they must put an end to him. The two clash, neither holding back. Eventually, Kaido executes his rapid movement, catching Toda off guard and snatching his heart. He tells Toda that anyone, even the immortal, dies once their heart is taken. But Manga shouts at Kaido to wait and not rush to destroy Toda's heart. Suddenly, black portals appear around Toda, cutting off Kaido's hand. A new heart forms within Toda, making him much stronger than before. However, Manga sees this as a terrible development, warning Karen that Toda's kind is extremely rare. Only 3 in history have ever possessed this power, known as Arabian magic. He recalls encountering one of them 25 years ago and being shocked by their power. But this type of magic is dangerous if uncontrolled because it absorbs all negative emotions and transforms them into immense strength. Karen warns him not to even think about harming Toda, saying that if Toda ever becomes a danger, the organization will be responsible for him, not anyone else. Meanwhile, Toda continues his relentless assault on Kaido. Surprisingly, Kaido is thrilled and completely surrenders to Toda, asking him to kill him because this is the perfect death he desires. But Toda resists, saying, "This isn't me. This strange power and darkness shouldn't be inside me." He struggles to control himself until he returns to normal. Kaido, now disappointed, gets up and tells Toda that he has already lost. But Toda insists that it wasn't a real victory because he wasn't himself during the fight. Kaido tells him that the darkness, the power inside him, is part of him, and he must learn to accept and control it. But Toda refuses to believe that. To settle the debate, Kaido proposes an arm wrestling match right then and there, declaring that whoever wins will be the true victor of their battle. Toda agrees, and as Kaido tosses a coin to start, the match begins. Kaido is just a fraction away from slamming Toda's hand to the ground and winning, but at the last moment, Toda resists, saying that he will never allow him or anyone else to harm others as they are doing now. When Kaido looks into Toda's eyes, he realizes that what's inside him is not Arabian magic, it's his own unique power, far greater than anything before. At that moment, Toda defeats Kaido so fiercely that he shatters the ground beneath them. Kaido is overjoyed and again asks Toda to kill him. But for the millionth time, Toda refuses. They all get up and return to the burned village, where Yukihime uses her ice magic to extinguish the fires. The villagers then come together to prepare food and water for those affected by the fire, working together to rebuild their home. Meanwhile, Toda keeps teasing Karen, who keeps hitting him every time. The next day, Kuram is walking down the street, talking to Toda's sword, which is upset and complaining about Toda. The sword says that if Toda didn't take it with him to fight the White Wolf, then why did he pull it from the rock in the first place? Kuram tries to calm the sword, saying, "I know you're upset, but I'm sure Toda didn't mean it that way. Then Koromaru asks if the sword knows anything about Arabian magic or its power. The sword responds that it doesn't know much, only that Arabian magic appeared in Toda a few days ago. Then the sword asks Koromaru if he believes that Yukihime was the one who passed this power down to Toda. Koromaru says he doesn't know, but he feels that something bad will happen to Toda because of his new power. The sword teases Koromaru, comparing him to girls because of his emotions. Koromaru gets annoyed, throws the sword away, and walks off while the sword keeps calling after him. But Koromaru pretends not to hear anything. Meanwhile, Toda goes to get a gift for Shinobu and gives it to her. In return, Shinobu takes him on a yacht trip, and Toda is very happy. She tells him that she assembled the yacht's parts herself and made some modifications to make it faster. Toda tells her that she has many other skills that she should put to use. Shinobu tells him that she wants to participate in the solar race, which happens once a year. That's why she left her village and came to the city. At the same time, a new girl appears who is very interested in Toda. She goes to Karen, asking for help to get closer to him. Karen decides to assist her and introduces her to Toda. He finds her attractive, and the girl asks him to take her on a trip and show her the capital. He agrees and goes to ask Shinobu if he can borrow her yacht to take the girl there faster. They go on the trip and have a great time together. When they reach the capital, they don't leave a single place unvisited. Toda takes the girl anywhere she wants to go. They walk so much that her shoes tear apart, so he fixes them for her and asks if she wants to go anywhere else. The girl points to the tower. Toda gets excited and agrees, so they go together. At the same time, the hunter who once tortured Karen is watching them. Meanwhile, Yukihime is in her office with Jinbei, feeling worried. She tells him that Toda's power has developed very quickly and become extremely noticeable. She is already concerned about him and fears that someone named Fate might do something to him. Meanwhile, Toda enjoys visiting the tower, but his biggest dream is to climb to its peak. The girl asks why he wants to reach the top. At that moment, Toda recalls his village, visiting his family, and a boy telling him that he is waiting for him at the tower's peak. Since then, he has wanted to reach the top to understand who that boy is. But instead of telling her this, he gives her another reason. He had many friends in the village, and before leaving, they all promised each other that they would climb to the peak together and achieve their dreams. The girl admires him even more, and he tells her about his close friend Koromaru, whom he met when he left the village. As they talk, the hunter suddenly appears and places a sharp blade against Toda's neck. But Toda notices and quickly dodges the attack. The hunter, whose name is revealed to be Shao, then uses black magic to create a large dark vortex, trapping Toda inside. Another hunter, named Asura, appears and tells Shao that their mission to capture Toda is nearly complete. But the girl attacks them, preventing them from kidnapping Toda. While fighting her, they throw her off the tower to get rid of her. But she turns out to be immortal. They chase after her and continue attacking her. Shao then creates another dark vortex, like the one that trapped Toda, and imprisons the girl inside. However, she remembers all her moments with Toda and decides to resist and break free to save him. But just in time, Koromaru, who happened to be at the tower by chance, arrives and rescues the girl. Then he rushes to free Toda and make sure he's okay. Toda is surprised and asks about the girl. Koromaru explains what happened and reassures him that she is safe. Toda thanks him for being there. Meanwhile, in the JK Palace, Ame is talking to a young girl named Kiri, who is drawing and writing strange symbols in the dirt. When he speaks to her, she tells him that their special event is about to begin. After Toda and Koromaru returned to the organization, Karen and Ame met them. Karen asked Koromaru about the girl who was with them, so he explained what had happened. Meanwhile, Ame introduced Toda to the little girl named Kiri. But before he could say a word, Kiri stopped him and said she wanted to speak with Toda alone for a moment. Toda agreed, and they walked away to a more distant place, continuing until Toda grew tired of walking. He asked Kiri where they were going, but she told him they had no specific destination, just that this place was suitable and far from people. Then she told him to sit down. He asked how, and she told him to shrink himself down so she could talk to him. Laughing at her, he did as she asked and sat on the ground so she could speak to him. But he was shocked when Kiri made him do that just so she could step on him. When he stopped her and asked why she was doing this, she said she needed to step on him 6 times. He didn't understand and still refused to let her do such a thing. At that moment, a shadow moved at an incredible speed, killing Kiri, who fell to the ground. Toda caught a glimpse of the attacker, thinking it was Shao or Asura, but he wasn't fast enough to stop them. He tried to wake Kiri, but suddenly, he found himself in the garden with Kiri beside him. He thought it had all been a dream, but then he asked himself, if it was a dream, when did it start and how did it end? Until Kiri spoke, telling him that everything that had happened was real, not a dream. They had simply gone back in time. Toda stood there, confused, not understanding what she had done or why she had reversed time. But she didn't explain anything just yet. At that moment, Ame and Karen passed by on a boat. When they spotted Toda, they asked what he was doing there since he was supposed to be with the girl in the capital. Just as Toda was about to tell them the truth, Kiri stepped on his foot to shut him up and spoke instead, saying that Toda had indeed gone to the capital but had just returned. Then she asked them to take her and Toda back to the capital. Karen and Ame agreed, and they all boarded the boat together. Karen and Ame stood to the side of the boat, talking. Karen was puzzled about how Toda returned so quickly and left the girl behind. But Ame seemed to understand what had happened and asked Karen if she knew anything about Kiri's abilities. She didn't, only that Kiri was immortal. Ame, however, refused to tell her everything about Kiri's powers. Meanwhile, Kiri and Toda stood together, talking. Kiri finally explained everything to Toda, telling him that the things she created in the sand were called save points. Every time she died, she returned to that point and to the exact moment when she created it in the sand. That's why, when she died, they both returned to that time. She also had the ability to bring anyone with her, as long as they were touching her. That's why, when he was with her when she died, they both went back, not just her alone. Toda was amazed by her power, calling it unique and incredible. He said that no matter how strong her enemy was, she could always come back and defeat them. She agreed but told him that dying was incredibly painful and that she had died many times because of it. Toda didn't fully understand what she meant, so she explained that she had tried to return to that moment multiple times. Each time, Toda would leave her and chase after the hunter, so she would return alone. That's why, in the last loop, she wanted to step on him because she was sick of him. Toda then asked why she kept resetting events every time. Kiri explained that there were important things happening around him, and he needed to know about them so they could change them. She then told him everything from the beginning, how she was once with Ame and Karen when they met Toda and Koromaru in the garden. At that time, she told them she had to leave for an important meeting at the tower's peak. When Toda heard the words, tower's peak, he followed her out of curiosity. She then stopped and spoke with him, but that's when the hunter appeared and killed her. So she reset and intentionally led Toda to the tower again, and this time, they managed to defeat the hunter and change the events. They continued resetting and repeating the cycle. Now, Toda finally defeated the hunter, and Kiri continued explaining what happened next. She said that later, she was sitting with Koromaru, talking, when suddenly, an explosion occurred. When they rushed to see what was happening, they found the great sorcerer Fate, the strongest and most legendary mage in history, holding Toda by the neck. Karen and Ame were nearby, trying to save Toda, but they couldn't. Fate easily pushed Karen and Ame aside and destroyed Toda. Even when Koromaru ran to save him, he couldn't do anything. Then, Fate approached Kiri, saying that Toda belonged to him. He cast a spell on Kiri to turn her into stone. At that moment, Kiri realized that if she were petrified, she wouldn't be able to die and reset time. So, before Fate could finish turning her into a statue, she killed herself, resetting everything back to the save point. Now, she and Toda were trying to fix what had happened and find a solution. Toda was still confused and kept asking Kiri who Fate was and why he wanted to control him. But Kiri got frustrated and told him that she didn't have answers to his questions and that they needed to find a solution instead of wasting time talking about things they couldn't change. At that moment, Karen and Ame appeared behind her. They had been listening the whole time and now knew about Kiri's hidden abilities. Kiri was annoyed, saying they weren't supposed to know. Toda was surprised and asked her why she had kept her powers a secret when they were so incredible. Ame told him that anyone with special abilities had to hide them because, for the immortals, their powers were both their strengths and weaknesses, which could be used against them. He then revealed that, once, a close friend of Kiri's tried to exploit her abilities, killing her repeatedly just to keep resetting time. Toda reassured Kiri, promising that he would never harm or exploit her, neither would Karen or Koromaru. But Toda wasn't sure he could trust Ame, who just laughed at him. Meanwhile, Kiri, after saying that she trusted them and knew they would never do such a thing to her, suddenly slapped Toda because she was still annoyed with him. Then she told them that the most important thing right now was to focus on the plan they would use to capture Fate. She explained that their first step was to let events unfold as they originally did, with some modifications. The first thing that would happen was that Fate would arrive at exactly 6 o'clock. Toda's job was to make sure Fate saw him, watched him, and that he had a phone with him. The moment he saw Fate, he would call them. That would be the signal for Karen and Ame to attack Fate and try to distract him. After that, the most crucial part would be Koromaru's task. His responsibility was to get Kiri safely to Fate. All he had to do was make sure that Kiri touched Fate, and that would be the end of it. Koromaru didn't understand and asked her how it would be over just by touching him. Frustrated by his cluelessness, Kiri explained that the moment she touched Fate, she would kill herself. The moment she died, they would go back in time again. But this time, she had already prepared the place they would return to. It would be a prison inside a cave in their base, where Fate wouldn't be able to escape. Everyone agreed that it was a great plan. But Koromaru pointed out that if he made her touch Fate, he would be touching her too, meaning all three of them would go back together and get trapped, not just Fate. Kiri dismissed it as a minor issue that didn't matter right now. However, Ame suggested that instead of just her and Koromaru returning, they should all go back together. Kiri agreed, saying there was no problem with that as long as everyone touched her before she killed herself. After agreeing on the plan, everyone took their positions. A few minutes before 6 o'clock, Toda pretended to be walking casually, talking on the phone with Kiri. But at that moment, he asked her why Yukiheim wasn't part of the plan. Kiri explained that if Yukiheim were involved, Fate would sense it, and the whole plan would fail. As he spoke, a hooded figure bumped into him but didn't show their face. Toda didn't pay much attention and continued talking to Kiri. However, at that moment, his call with Kiri was cut off, and he received a recorded video message from Yukiheim. In the video, she told him that 80 years ago, a disaster occurred on Mars, which led to Fate and Negi, Toda's grandfather, working together to find a solution. At the time, Fate was kind and cared deeply about Negi. However, 20 years ago, when Negi died, Fate changed completely. Since then, he had wanted to take control of Toda because of his unknown connection to Negi. Yukiheim warned him not to believe anything Fate said or tried to convince him of. At that moment, Toda was confused. This was the first time he had ever heard about his grandfather Negi being a mage, knowing Yukiheim and Fate. As the call ended, Toda kept thinking, wondering about Fate's connection to his grandfather. He also considered the possibility that this was somehow related to the death of his parents. But Kiri interrupted his thoughts, telling him that they could now see Fate in front of them. Toda asked where he was. They told him that he was the tall man with white hair. When Toda looked around and saw Fate, he also noticed that two of his friends from the village were walking beside Fate. Shocked, he told Kiri. Kiri immediately said that they had to cancel the attack to avoid harming Toda's friends. But Toda disagreed, insisting that they couldn't cancel the plan now and that the operation had to proceed. Toda acted completely normal, and as soon as his friends saw him, they ran over, excited to greet him. They couldn't believe they had met him here, and he also pretended to be happy, asking them what they were doing in this place. They told him that they had come because they had a friend who worked here and they were visiting. At that moment, Ame informed them that the mission would continue. He had linked missiles to the satellites, ready to launch them at Fate as soon as they saw him. They asked Toda to be the one to protect his friends when the missiles were launched. But suddenly, a girl pretending to work at the facility appeared and stabbed Ame with her sword, telling him that she wouldn't let him do what he wanted. At that moment, Fate approached Toda, placing his hand on his friend's shoulders and addressing Toda in an incredibly polite manner. He introduced himself as Fate, a friend of his grandfather. What was strange was that he didn't do any of the crazy things they had expected. Kiri, Karen, and everyone else tried to contact Ame, but there was no response. Meanwhile, Fate told Toda that he knew everything about him, that he was someone without a past, with no memories, and no real purpose right now. But if he came with him willingly, he would turn him into something great in the future, just like his grandfather. However, if he refused, his two dear friends would die right in front of him. He threatened Toda, ordering him to call out the rest of his friends from their hiding spots and cancel their plan. Toda remained calm and told Fate that he had won. Fate responded that this was exactly what he expected from Yukiheim's team. Toda then asked for his opinion, now that he knew they had once worked together. Fate replied that Yukiheim was selfish, using him for years to fulfill her own desires, nothing more. Toda told him that even if that were true, he still wouldn't go with him and then pulled out his sword. Fate laughed at him, asking what he could possibly do with that sword. But Toda looked him straight in the eye, full of courage, and suddenly shouted loudly for everyone to run away immediately, claiming that Fate was a terrorist with a bomb and was about to blow up the place. The crowd panicked and fled. At that moment, Karen appeared, severing Fate's arm and pushing Toda's friends away. Then both Karen and Toda attacked Fate simultaneously, but Fate quickly erected a barrier between them. However, he was shocked when he saw that Toda managed to break through his barrier. At the same time, Ame broke free from the girl who attacked him and launched the satellite missile as planned. A massive explosion erupted at the site, and when Fate tried to control the debris flying toward him, Kiri signaled Koromaru to move in and grab Fate, but they were intercepted by some of Fate's subordinates, who blocked them. Koromaru quickly threw Kiri toward Fate, and Toda grabbed her so they could go back in time together. However, they were shocked when Fate petrified Kiri, preventing anything from happening. He laughed at them, saying that although he didn't know Kiri's abilities, it seemed like she was their trump card, exactly the kind of move he expected from Yukiheim's team. Karen told Toda that they had to retreat immediately because the plan had failed. She grabbed Kiri's petrified body and tried to escape, but Toda refused to run. Fate told him that he needed at least a few minutes to regain his strength, so if Toda wanted to attack him now, he was welcome to try. Toda believed him and told Karen that this was their chance. Karen got furious, telling him that Fate was obviously tricking him, but Toda said that since Fate was once his grandfather's friend, deep down, he wasn't truly evil, and maybe they should give him a chance and trust him. Then he grabbed his sword and charged toward Fate. Meanwhile, Karen was confronted by a man named Jori. She secured Kiri on her back and attacked Jori. Koromaru faced off against Asura, who was half human and half Martian. Meanwhile, Ame continued fighting the girl who had initially delayed his mission. Each of them took on their opponent, trying to analyze their moves and find their weaknesses. But then, Karen noticed that numbers were appearing on Kiri's hand in a countdown, though she didn't understand what it meant or why it was happening. Back in the fight, as soon as Toda touched Fate, Fate sent him flying backward. Toda then increased the weight of his sword to amplify his strength and charged at Fate again. However, Fate summoned a massive number of swords and hurled them all at Toda. Toda managed to deflect them all. Fate then smirked, telling Toda that his grandfather could do all these moves when he was just 10 years old and that Toda was exactly like him. Toda attacked Fate again, but he couldn't land a single hit. The battle dragged on for a long time as Toda desperately tried to break through Fate's defenses. Eventually, he managed to wound Fate slightly. Meanwhile, Karen called Toda, asking if he knew anything about the numbers appearing on Kiri's hand. Toda told her that he had no idea but that they needed to trust Kiri because she had probably planned for this. He then hung up and continued his fight. But at that moment, Fate suddenly lunged at him, grabbing his head, preparing to rip it off his body. Toda thought quickly and increased the weight of his sword, bringing them both crashing to the ground. He then told everyone to grab Kiri immediately, while he himself held on to Fate. The moment the countdown ended, Kiri returned to normal, and for the first time, she thanked Toda for his quick thinking before sending them all back to the prison, leaving herself outside. Fate was completely shocked and couldn't believe what had just happened. Surrounded by Toda and the others, he then noticed Yukiheim sitting and waiting for him, smirking. She mockingly told him that he probably couldn't believe that a team of kids had managed to defeat him. She also mentioned that it had been around 20 years since they last saw each other. Fate told her that she was the one who cut off all communication when she refused to join his team. He then levitated into the air, forming a magic barrier around himself. Yukiheim told him to stop wasting his energy because, at the end of the day, he was still human, not immortal like them, and there was nothing for him to gain from doing this as he continued to age. Fate admitted that she was right and said that he would accept his defeat and leave. But Toda refused to let him go after everything he had done. Fate then offered them a deal. He told them that as a reward for their effort at the tower, they would let him go, and in return, he would answer one question from each of them with complete honesty, since he knew everything. He turned to Toda first, asking what he wanted to know, whether it was about his grandfather, the past, or something else. Toda got excited, ready to ask, but Karen smacked him on the head. He got frustrated and told her that one day, she was going to kill him. Karen told him to think carefully and not rush, since it was only one question. Toda took her advice and stopped to think before speaking. Everyone stood there, hesitant, unsure of what to ask. Even Toda had countless questions, and choosing just one was difficult. Ame made it easier for everyone by saying that he would ask first, a question that everyone wanted the answer to. He asked why Fate wanted to kidnap Toda and what he intended to use his power for. Fate replied that the answer was very simple. He wanted Toda's power because he was the only one capable of saving his grandfather, Negi. Toda was shocked and asked, confused, about his grandfather, because he had thought he was dead. Fate told him that Yukiheim was the one who must have told him that. But Negi was still alive, and saving him would rescue Earth and all of humanity. Toda hesitated, feeling conflicted and wanting to ask more, but Karen interrupted him, saying that she would ask her question first. She asked, who did Negi love more, me or Yukiheim? Everyone was stunned by her question. She simply said that she had been curious about the answer for a long time, nothing more. But surprisingly, this was the one question Fate couldn't answer. He didn't know who Negi loved more. Then it was Koromaru's turn. He brought up what Fate had said earlier, that in order to save Negi and humanity, they needed Toda's power. So he asked if they needed it right now. Fate told him no, because the disaster wouldn't happen for another 20 years. So they didn't need Toda yet. This meant that Toda would be staying with them for a long time and wouldn't have to leave them anytime soon. Finally, it was Toda's turn to ask his question. He didn't hesitate and asked Fate if he had anything to do with the death of his parents. Fate answered yes. He was the one who killed Toda's parents. Toda became furious, telling Fate that he had no choice but to beat him to death. But at that moment, a portal suddenly appeared between Toda and Fate. From it, a video message played, showing the boy Toda had always seen in his visions. The boy told Toda that he would be waiting for him at the top of the tower. Everyone was shocked to realize that this boy was actually Negi, Toda's grandfather. As Negi started speaking to Toda, Yukihime activated her telepathic ability, communicating with Koromaru privately without anyone else hearing. She told him that the portal had appeared because of Toda, and they needed to close it immediately. She also told him that he would find a symbol on Toda's back and needed to cut it off with his sword. Koromaru followed her instructions. At that moment, Negi was telling Toda that everything Fate had said was a lie and that he shouldn't believe him. Fate shouted angrily at Negi, but Negi silenced him, saying that he needed to tell Toda the truth. But before he could finish, Koromaru found the symbol and removed it, cutting off the connection. The portal closed instantly, and they lost their chance to hear what Negi was about to say. Toda was furious, demanding that Fate tell him the truth once and for all. But no one answered Toda's questions. Meanwhile, Karen and Koromaru sat with Kiri, telling her about everything that had happened inside while she wasn't there. She was completely shocked and furious, wanting to burn them all for keeping her out of the important events. After everything she had done, Yukihime was just going to let Fate walk out of prison like it was nothing. On top of that, Negi had appeared, and she had missed the whole thing, even though the entire mission had happened because of her. Meanwhile, Toda kept following Yukihime, bombarding her with questions about his grandfather, why she had never told him that he was still alive, what really happened 2 years ago, and who he should believe, his grandfather or Fate. Yukihime got fed up with his endless questions, so she ran to her office and locked the door to escape from him. At the same time, a car arrived, carrying an old woman and some girls. They looked completely normal, just regular humans. However, the guards stopped them, telling them that ordinary citizens were not allowed inside the organization. The old woman laughed and told them that she could enter anywhere she pleased because she wanted to meet Evangeline, who people now called Yukihime. Meanwhile, one of the girls wanted to meet Toda. Toda, on the other hand, was training as usual. Shinobu happened to pass by, and he accidentally knocked over her things. He helped her pick them up, and they sat together. She made him tea, and they talked for a while. He told her that her tea was the best he had ever had in the city and that she was the person he enjoyed talking to the most. Karen and Koromaru stood nearby, eavesdropping, though neither Toda nor Shinobu noticed. At that moment, the girl from the gate burst in, knocking over their teacups. She introduced herself as Mizo and told them that they had better remember her name. Toda asked her who she was and what she wanted. She told him that she knew his grandfather, the man who used to annoy her grandmother. Now, she had come to get revenge on his grandson. She suddenly attacked Toda, trying to hit him. But when Toda tried to dodge her, he accidentally sent her flying out the window. Shocked, he rushed to save her, catching her before she hit the ground. Then, he encouraged her, telling her that her abilities were impressive for her age. However, she didn't like being flattered. But then she immediately contradicted herself, remembering that this was Toda, the guy she actually admired. She decided to take advantage of their family rivalry and told him that she wouldn't allow him to bother any girl in the city. That's why they had to get married and throw a huge wedding. Everyone was stunned by her bold declaration. Toda immediately rejected her, telling her that he barely remembered her name, let alone making such a huge decision with a complete stranger. Meanwhile, the old woman met with Yukihime. They reminisced about their school days, when they were classmates with Negi, Toda's grandfather. They remembered how every girl in their class had been in love with him, calling him the most handsome boy in all of Japan. They used to fight over who would make him fall for them and believed that if they cooked him a good meal, he would surely fall in love with them. They laughed at how foolish they had been back then. Meanwhile, Mizo followed in her grandmother's footsteps, deciding to win Toda's heart through food. The next morning, she woke up early to cook for him and later met him wearing the same outfit as Shinobu. She acted incredibly sweet and joined Toda and Shinobu for a meal. She prepared a huge variety of dishes, making sure to include something for everyone. Karen, Koromaru, and Kiri watched from a distance, completely baffled by what was happening but also entertained. At that moment, Ame arrived and noticed them spying on Toda. He told them that he knew Kiri had a crush on Toda, which was why she was watching him so closely while pretending not to care. Kiri was shocked and tried to deny it, but it was obvious she was lying. Ame then told her that he had magical ways to help her win Toda's heart easily. He explained that the first trick was through his stomach, just like Mizo was doing. If they wanted to know more secrets, they shouldn't hesitate to ask him. Meanwhile, Yukihime and the old woman continued talking about Negi. Yukihime admitted that when she saw him with her own eyes during the last incident, she couldn't believe it. She recalled how a certain witch had captured and imprisoned him. It was likely that this witch was the one who allowed him to communicate with them again. But the most important thing Negi did was refuse to drag Toda into the situation. However, they still didn't reveal what they were hiding from Toda or what really happened to his grandfather. Later, Toda decided to clear his mind and went swimming in the lake with Ame. They talked while floating in the water. Ame revealed that even though he was 13 years old, he had actually been in a coma for 75 years. His body never aged, and he only woke up when Yukihime found him and turned him. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't even be here today. Toda told him that his story was incredibly tragic. Meanwhile, Mizo, despite her brash personality, had a kind heart. She sat down with Shinobu and apologized for treating her badly in the past. They talked for a while, and the one thing they both kept discussing was Toda. At the same time, Yukihime returned to her true form, Evangeline. She went to talk to Toda, and he immediately asked her if she had loved his grandfather. She told him that yes, she had loved Negi, but not the version of him that appeared in the portal. Toda told her that he didn't understand anything. She explained that 20 years ago, Negi had defeated an evil witch known as the Witch of Beginnings. This witch was not immortal but had an incredibly long lifespan. However, anyone who defeated her fell under her control. That was exactly what had happened to Negi. After he defeated the witch, she took control of him and imprisoned him. For 20 years, he fought against her influence, but he was reaching his limit. It was only a matter of time before she completely took over. Evangeline told Toda that she had tried everything to help him and had come up with countless plans, but nothing worked. Even Negi himself refused to accept her methods. Toda told her that he understood the basic idea, but there were still so many unanswered questions. But since his grandfather was being controlled by someone else, it meant that fate had been right. However, when it came to the death of his parents, he still didn't know who to believe. Evangeline finally decided to tell him the truth. She revealed that fate was indeed responsible for the incident 2 years ago. But the people who died in that incident were not his parents. Toda was shocked, realizing that this meant his parents were still alive. But Evangeline shattered that hope immediately. She told him that he never had parents. He was born in a completely different way, through the genetic information of Negi. In other words, he was a clone. The first thing Toda did after hearing this shocking revelation was rush to tell his closest friend, Kuram. He explained everything that had happened and said he was confused and upset, not knowing what to do. What frustrated him even more was that Yukihime had taken care of him all this time not because of him, but out of responsibility toward his grandfather. Not only that, but his entire life had been built on lies. At that moment, they heard Kiri and Mizo arguing. Kiri didn't want Mizo to take Toda anywhere because they were still worried about fate. But Mizo didn't care about any of that. She kicked open the door, barged in, and told Toda that he wasn't going to stay locked in this room forever. She was taking him to Mahora Academy, a place none of his friends knew about except for her. Meanwhile, Yukihime spoke with the old woman, telling her that she had told Toda everything because she didn't want him to learn it from someone else. The old woman agreed, telling her that she had done the right thing. Meanwhile, Mizo took Toda to the academy, where a tournament was taking place for the first time, the Mahora Games. People from all the schools in the country were participating in the competition. Mizo, wanting to excite him even more, told him that the finals would be held at the top of the tower. Toda was immediately interested and asked if he could participate even though he wasn't human. Mizo told him that anyone could participate, but they had to pass the preliminary rounds to enter the main event. Excited, Toda ran off to find the registration office. Mizo chased after him to make sure he didn't get lost. Koromaru stood back, confused by Toda's enthusiasm, considering that he had been depressed just 2 minutes ago. Kiri asked him why Toda had been upset, but Koromaru told her that it was a secret between friends. She got annoyed, grabbed his shirt, and demanded an answer. Meanwhile, Toda reached the registration office only to be told that all the spots were full. However, if someone dropped out, they would let him take their place. Mizo tried to comfort him, but Toda wasn't discouraged. Instead, he told her that he wasn't upset at all. In fact, he was going to participate next year, which would give him more time to train and improve his chances of winning. At that moment, the old woman arrived, revealing herself to be Mizo's grandmother, Yukira. She introduced herself to Toda, along with her assistants, and asked Mizo to leave her alone with Toda so they could talk. Meanwhile, Shinobu was sitting around, feeling bored because Toda was gone, and all his friends were with him in the capital. While cleaning, she overheard Karen asking Yukiheim where she was going. Yukiheim told her that her friends were gathering in the capital, and she wanted to surprise them. Karen wanted to go with her. Seeing that everyone was heading to the capital, Shinobu decided to go too. At the same time, Yukira told Toda more about his grandfather. She explained that when they were all in school, Negi was their teacher, even though he was only 10 years old. Everyone admired him. She took Toda to the classroom where he used to teach, where he met several former students of Negi. They were overjoyed to meet Negi's grandson. Yukira told him that he was the complete opposite of his grandfather. Toda was more energetic, talkative, and confident, whereas Negi had been shy and reserved. However, they both had the same eyes. Toda, still frustrated, told her that he wasn't really Negi's grandson. But Yukira told him that even though he was a clone, Negi had been proud of him. If Negi were here now, he would see Toda as his true grandson. Toda told her that they all knew Negi better than he did, so he would try to believe them. At that moment, one of the event officials received a phone call. A player had been injured, and they needed a replacement immediately. Looking at Toda, she said that she knew just the right person. She registered Toda into the competition, and he was thrilled. The day of the match arrived, and everyone gathered to watch and cheer for Toda. He was up against a fighter named Lanakas. The moment Toda saw him, he felt like he had seen him before, but he couldn't remember where. The battle began, and Lanakas used magic to block all of Toda's attacks. Both fighters were incredibly strong, but something was strange about Lanaka's power. Even Koromara noticed something was off and told his friends that something wasn't right about Toda's opponent. Meanwhile, the tournament official was watching with the injured player. The injured player suddenly told her that Lanakas was the one who had attacked him. At that moment, she realized that Lanakas had planned everything to fight Toda specifically. During the fight, Lanakas told Toda that he was nothing more than a weak copy. Then, he slashed Toda in half. Everyone was shocked, and his friends panicked. They begged Koromaru to jump in and help Toda, but Koromaru told them that a barrier surrounded the arena, preventing anyone from entering. However, Toda didn't need help. He rose again, transforming into the same dark, powerful form that had fought the White Wolf. Lanakas, excited, told Toda to show him everything he had. But Toda seemed to have lost control, attacking like a wild beast. Even so, his attacks couldn't harm Lanakas. Lanakas easily impaled Toda with another sword, pinning him to the ground. Then, he used black magic, summoning countless swords to pin Toda in place, preventing him from moving. Lanakas then asked Toda how it felt to be nothing but a weak copy of Negi, created only to replicate his intelligence and power, yet failing at both. He told him that he was worthless compared to Negi. Toda began to lose himself, affected by Lanaka's words. But then, his friends cheered for him. Hearing their voices, Toda regained his confidence. He told Lanakas that it didn't matter how he was born, what mattered was that he was Negi's grandson and the 7th warrior of the UQ organization. He broke free from the swords restraining him. At that moment, Lanakas revealed that she was actually a girl, not a boy. She told Toda that this was only the beginning. At that moment, Negi appeared, descending from the sky. Everyone was stunned. However, the old woman's friends told her not to be shocked. This wasn't the Negi they knew. It was the Witch of Beginnings. Negi told Toda that he had come to take him with him so they could save the world together. Toda asked why he hadn't come to take him from the village earlier. Negi told him that he didn't even know he was alive and that if it weren't for Yukiheim, he would have died. But Toda didn't believe him. At that moment, Yukiheim arrived, breaking the barrier around the arena. She stood in front of Negi, stopping him from doing anything to Toda. Her entire team stood beside her, ready to fight. At the same time, Negi's team appeared. Both groups stood across from each other, waiting for their leader's signal to begin the battle. At that moment, Yukiheim warned Toda, telling him that Negi's team wouldn't be easy to defeat, especially the 3 with him. She had thought they were dead for a long time. The first was Yui, the wise teacher. The second was Nodoka, the mind reader. The third was Jack, an incredibly powerful swordsman. Just as both sides were about to clash, Shinobu finally arrived in the capital. She told herself that she had come too late and wished she could have watched Toda compete. Inside the arena, Kiri suddenly spoke up, saying that there was no point in fighting. Since both teams wanted Toda, why not just sit down and talk to him instead? They could try to convince him peacefully and let him decide where he wanted to go. Toda couldn't believe what she was saying and asked her how she could suggest such a thing. Kiri glared at him angrily, forcing him to stay quiet. Nodoka, the mind reader, opened her book and said, "I'm just stalling for time so we can come up with a strategy to defeat them, idiot." Then, she turned to Kiri and asked her if that was what she had meant to tell Toda. She then told Toda that he should just come with them and stop making things difficult. Toda, angry, asked them why they were so determined to take him. Yui told him that after 70 failed attempts at cloning Negi, he was the only success on the 71st try. They weren't going to give him up after all that effort. When they realized that Tota wasn't going to listen, they created a dark vortex and pulled him inside. Suddenly, Tota found himself in another world. There, he saw Evangeline running, injured, before collapsing to the ground. He rushed to help her but tripped and fell on his face. When he got up, the world around him changed again. Someone approached him from behind, speaking to him. He introduced himself as Conan. Tota asked who he was and what he wanted. But then, Tota's sword spoke up, telling him that his name wasn't Conan. He was actually Alberio, a famous sorcerer who had forged the sword. Tota shouldn't be fooled by his friendly attitude. He was a terrifyingly strong monster who had once defeated Yukiheim. Alberio, annoyed by the sword's words, trapped it in a dark vortex to silence it. He then told Tota that he used to be an old friend of Yukiheim, but now he worked for Negi. His mission was to convince Tota to go with Negi, and the best way to convince him was to show him what happened next. Tota turned around and saw Evangeline falling from a tall cliff, but Nagai, Negi's father, saved her. From that moment on, Evangeline never wanted to leave his side and followed him everywhere. Alberio told Tota that this was where Evangeline's love story began. 15 years later, Nagai had a son, Negi. When Negi turned 10, he enrolled in the academy, where Evangeline was also studying. The two grew closer and became great friends. Alberio showed Tota all of Yukiheim's memories with Negi. Tota thanked Alberio, saying that he had always wanted to know about the past. But Alberio told him that this wasn't the past, it was the present. At that moment, Evangeline suddenly saw Tota and asked him what he was doing there. Tota was shocked that she could see and recognize him. But suddenly, a giant woman restrained Evangeline. Alberio stabbed Tota, and the giant woman introduced herself. She was Yolda, the Witch of Beginnings, their enemy. She killed Evangeline and told Tota that if he wanted to save her and prevent this from happening in reality, he had to join her. Tota couldn't bear it and carried Evangeline until she recovered. Evangeline then told Tota that she had been pulled into this illusion as well. The only way to escape was to defeat the Witch of Beginnings together. They charged at her, attacking simultaneously, but she transformed into Nagai. Both of them hesitated, unable to attack. She struck them and then created an illusion of Negi to fight against them. Of course, both Negi and Nagai were extremely powerful. Tota and Evangeline used every bit of magic and strength they had to break free from the illusion. But then, the witch invaded their minds, trapping them in more hallucinations. They couldn't escape on their own. Suddenly, a girl appeared, broke the illusion, and rescued Tota. However, they were still inside the vortex. Tota asked who she was. She introduced herself as Asuna. And, by the way, she was his grandmother. Tota wasn't even shocked anymore. By now, he had been hit with so many shocking revelations that nothing surprised him anymore. Evangeline asked Asuna how she had entered the vortex. She was supposed to be dead. She had sacrificed herself on Mars. Asuna explained that she had been inside Tota all along, stored as part of the cloning process. When Yolda manipulated Tota's mind and emotions, she accidentally freed her, along with all of Tota's friends. Asuna then told Tota that this whole illusion wasn't lasting as long as he thought. In the real world, only a fraction of a second had passed. That was a good thing, because now they had time. She would teach him everything he could use against Yolda in the real world. But the most important thing he needed to know was that the power inside him was the only thing that could truly defeat Yolda. He had to learn how to control it and use it properly. Before she left to fight Yolda and return them to the real world, she made Tota promise to take care of Negi when they got back. Then, she attacked Yolda and cut her in half. At that moment, everyone returned to the real world. The real battle began. But they realized that Asuna hadn't actually left them. Before they returned, she gave each of them specific advice on how to defeat their opponent. The first thing she told Kiri was that when she fought Jack, she should strike his eye first to throw him off. She did exactly that, and Karen followed up with an attack, knocking Jack down before he could defend himself. Meanwhile, Yui and Nodoka could read thoughts, but their attack skills were terrible. So Karen let them read her thoughts all they wanted, then attacked them and restrained them. Meanwhile, Tota pretended to rush at Lanaka's, but he didn't actually attack. Instead, Yukiheim appeared behind him and froze Lanaka's in place. Tota then charged toward Negi, leaping into the air and slashing with his sword to cut him in half. But he realized that this wasn't the real Negi, it was just an illusion. The real Negi appeared behind him and told Tota to come with him so they could save the world together. Tota told him that it wouldn't happen unless he saved him from the Witch of Beginnings first. At that moment, even the rest of the team started weakening. All their attack strategies became ineffective. Even Tota was losing to the Witch of Beginnings, who still controlled his grandfather. She was about to shatter his sword completely, but Yukiheim arrived to support him. With her came Fate, and the three of them joined forces to bring Negi back. But as soon as they did, they were suddenly flung into the air. Negi, who had been fighting them, transformed into a young child. At the same time, they also reverted to children. At that moment, Fate realized he had found a way to save Negi. The solution was Toda. Since Toda's immortality was incredibly strong, they could use it to make all of humanity immortal. This would drain the witch's energy, weaken her control over Negi, and ultimately save him. But Negi told Fate that the only way to get rid of the witch was to kill him, because she lived inside him. Fate refused, saying that his entire plan was about saving him, not killing him. Negi, however, insisted that he was trying to save humanity. But Fate didn't care about humanity. The only thing that mattered to him was his friend, because he was the one the witch was originally supposed to take over, not Negi. Negi called Fate a great friend and told him not to blame himself. Then, Negi turned to Toda, saying that there wasn't much time left. He wanted to tell him something, but Toda interrupted him, saying that if there was so little time, he should talk to Evangeline first. The moment Negi saw Evangeline, he broke down in tears. He apologized for failing to save his father, but Evangeline didn't let him finish. She bid him farewell before time ran out. As soon as they returned to reality, the battle resumed. Yukiheim and Fate attacked at the same time. Yukiheim froze Negi, while Fate turned him to stone. But none of it worked. Negi broke free and attacked them again. This time, they couldn't keep up with him. Negi used his lightning abilities to eliminate Toda once and for all. However, Toda managed to absorb Negi's lightning and was flung outside the tower. The fight continued in midair. Toda was stunned by Negi's power, but when he remembered everything his grandfather had done and what he was about to do, Toda became furious. He channeled all his negative emotions, combining them with the lightning he had absorbed from Negi. This triggered an overwhelming surge of energy. Toda attacked Negi relentlessly, hitting him over and over again. He shouted that he was going to save him, save Yukiheim, and save the entire world. But at that moment, Jack appeared and stabbed Toda in the chest with his sword. Toda fell back onto the battlefield, unable to move. The sword was lodged deep in his heart. Negi approached, preparing to deliver the final blow that would end Toda for good. But Kiri stepped in, blocking his path. Immediately, Lanakas grabbed Kiri and stabbed her with a knife, torturing her right in front of Toda. Toda, driven by rage and fear for Kiri, managed to stand up despite the sword still in his chest. But Kiri reminded him not to forget the plan. She told him that they had already won. They had successfully distracted their enemies for the time they needed. Suddenly, Negi was transported to another location, a place where all of the old woman's former students were gathered. They all tried to bring him back to his senses. Each of them attacked him, but in reality, they were showing off their skills, hoping to impress him. None of it affected him, until Asuna arrived and spoke to him herself. At that moment, the witch's control over Negi began to weaken. Negi listened to Asuna as she spoke, thanking his entire team for looking after him. She told him that she would never leave him again. At that moment, the Witch of Beginnings spoke again. She told Toda that their conversation wasn't over yet. She wanted him to meet her at the top of the tower. Then, she vanished. After that, everything returned to normal. The group returned to their organization.